Start. Okay, so Securely actually has two purposes. Securely is our filtering system. We used to have a system called RM Buzz. Securely is now the filtering system, and it now does the filtering that we used to get from RM. So anything that's blocked, anything that needs to be blocked can be done through Securely. We bought this system about 6 months ago, mainly because it provides us with a much more responsive way of dealing with things. It's also more intuitive. This is a kind of slightly aside, but we can actually track and see what children have been looking at in far more detail. Now, obviously, we have to follow the various privacy policies that exist, but a good example of how Securely was particularly helpful was that last year we were asked to do a quick sort of check on a pupil from a high school in Inverness because the pupil had gone missing. And when we go into the other part of Securely that we're not looking at today, you can actually see some of the search results and some of the search attempts, some of the ones that were failed. So we went into this pupil's account with permission, and we could actually see what she had been searching for. And as it happened, she'd been searching for train times to Aberdeen, and then actually train times to Exeter. So we were actually able to help the police to sort of direct them towards where she potentially might have been going. As it happened, she didn't get very far. But that's the kind of level of detail that it gives us potentially, which from a child protection point of view is quite good. So it's not just blocking the actual searches, it's actually blocking, it's not just showing you, the search results that were blocked, it's showing you the ones that were attempted as well. So you can actually see an awful lot more. So that's Securely. What we can also do with Securely, which is useful to know, is that if, for instance, there was a particular site that wasn't necessarily appropriate for primary, but was okay for secondary, we can actually now, using Securely, block things by primary and secondary. We can also go in and block YouTube channels, which is something that we couldn't previously do. So there's an awful lot of options with the Securely filtering. But the bit we're looking at today is the Securely Classroom part. And you actually already have an account with Securely. Everyone has got an account, every teacher's got an account. And you can have a go at this after we've done this, this session. Basically, you go to securely.com and it will then jump to this add-on part of the address. And what you want to do is to go down to where it says device console. I don't think you have any other option but to go to device console. When you see the word classroom, you'll know you're in the right place. So when you go to this next page, you'll see that you've got the option to sign in with Google, and basically it will do what it does with lots of other tools. It will ask you to sign in using your Google account. When you sign in using that Google account, what it does in effect is it actually links it directly to your own Google account. And that's really important because I'm going to show you in a second how the Securely Classroom feature actually works. And it works based on your own Google account. You come to this page here. Obviously, I'm in as an admin, so I'm going to see a lot more than you would see. But the bit you want to go to when you first log in is to Teacher Tools. And Teacher Tools is where you can start doing some of the things that hopefully you will find useful today. Now, again, I'm in as admin, so I'm actually seeing every set of groups that are in the system. When you log in, you will only see the stuff that's relevant to you. And the reason why it's important that you log in with your Highland Google account is because what it will look for and find are all the Google classrooms that you are a teacher in. Because that's how Securely Classroom works. It works on the basis of Google Classroom. So here's all the Google Classrooms that are in our console. I could scroll down for days and days. So when you log in, what you'll see up here is just the classrooms that you are a teacher in. Now I'm going to go in and search for the classroom that I want to demonstrate today on. So I've created my own classroom here, Securely Classroom. And just for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to jump to Google Classroom just to show you that this does link up. So I'm just going into my Google Classroom, and what you'll see here, I've got a Securely Classroom, and in that classroom at the moment is myself and Andy. So that's where I am actually now. That's the classroom that I am using for my Securely Classroom. I think I've invited Narelle to be that part of that class as well. So any pupils that are in your classroom will appear here. And this is where you can now start making some of the, or using some of the features that apply to you. What you need to do is you need to, though, start a class. You don't actually start using the features until you press Start Class. So when I click on Start Class, it gives me the options here as to how I want this classroom to start. I can change the time length. I can change the time it finishes. There's a few other options that I can also add in. But basically, if you want to do this just, basically as and when you're actually needing to use it, then 60 minutes will probably be enough, and you can just press Start. The reason why you can schedule a classroom to work is that you might have the same class every single week, and you want to have this in place every week. So you can set it up so that each week at, say, 10 o'clock, a Securely Classroom begins. Having done this, what would now happen on the pupils' Chromebooks is notification would pop up at the bottom that would say Securely Classroom has begun. They haven't got the option to opt out, but it just tells them that it started. It tells them that now they're actually in a Securely Classroom. They don't have to log into it. All they have to do is have their Chromebook switched on, and notification will pop up. So what can you do? Well, here's some things that you can do, first of all, with your the students that are in your classroom. You can have a chat with them. So you could, I'm not sure if Andy's actually, he won't be online just now, but if Andy was online, I could actually go in and have a conversation with Andy, and that would start pinging up notifications down the side here saying that your teacher wishes to speak to you. I could go in and I can actually look at the history of what Andy's been doing. Again, I've not got a very good example here because he hasn't been online, but what I can see is a history of the conversations that we've had, any screens that I've saved, and we'll come to that in a second, and just the general history of what Andy's been doing. So if you imagine this is an hour-long class that you've set up, maybe it's during your writing lesson, you'll be able to see everything that Andy has been doing during that hour. And you can also, by clicking on Device View, you can also go in and actually see what is currently on his device at that time. So I'll just come back out. Again, it doesn't quite have the impact if you've not actually got somebody online at the moment on the Chromebook. So that's how you can look at individual pupils, but probably more usefully for you, if you wanted to do this across the whole class, there are a number of features that you can also use. So the first one is screen lock. If I press yes here, what will happen on the pupil screens is it will tell the pupil that the screen has been locked by the teacher. So it will actually lock their screen down so that they can't do anything on that device. So that would be where if you've got a child or children who are constantly, even though you're teaching, even though you're speaking to them, are constantly flicking from site to site. This will lock their screen in. You can see it's got auto release, or you can simply click on it again and it will stop. So that's a screen lock. However, you've also got site lock, and this is where, from a learning and teaching point of view, you might find this to be of some use. Because what you can do is, if during that lesson that you're doing, you only want them to focus on one particular site, maybe it's a site that's going to support the work they're doing, maybe it's a site that's got some text that you want them to look at, you can actually lock it down to only that site. And the way that you do that is just up here, is you would simply type in the name of the web address that you want, and you would give it a name if you want to, and then you would just simply lock it to that, and that would then allow that site, the device, to be locked to that site. You can also restrict it to more than one link. So it could be that during the course of that hour, you know that there's going to be 2 or 3 sites you want them to look at. Maybe it's the BBC site, maybe it's, I don't know, some dog when they're finished that piece of work. You can have 2 or 3 in here, add those, and then that will also lock it just to those ones. So that means that along the bottom of their Chromebook, they'll only be able to access the 3 sites that you've chosen. So that's site lock. You can then obviously press release, and that will remove any of the locks that have been put on place. You can also, though, push a URL. So this is a bit different from site lock. The site lock is where you're actually pinning the device down to that particular site, but you could also send them a URL that you want them to look at. So again, if I was just to go in here and search for the URL here, a URL, that will push that out to the pupils, and what will appear then on their screen, a notification at the bottom that just says a site has been sent to you by your teacher. They're not forced to look at it, but it's a way of sending out a site for pupils to have a look at. Announcement, again, where you can send a message to all pupils. So please note that this lesson will finish. And when you press announce, that will appear as notification across all pupils' Chromebooks along the bottom, and then they obviously can act upon what you've said. And the other option, which is quite useful, is that you can share your screen with the pupils so that they can actually see what it is that you are doing. And a bit like on Google Meet, when you pick the window or tab that you want to have them sharing, all you do is pick the one that you want them to see, and that is now me sharing my screen with the pupils. What you'll notice when I went back into that share screen was, I go back in, you've got the option to lock them into that, which then means that they can't leave that screen. So that would obviously be where if you thought pupils were not capable of, not jumping across to something. So even though you're sharing your screen and talking about whatever it was you were doing, they actually could still come out of that and go to a different site. With this option here, that will now lock them to only seeing your screen. So if you want them to be able to see something, this would work well when perhaps you had a board that wasn't working, when perhaps, as I'm just about to show you in a second, where if you wanted to do this with a small group of children, because you're not actually tied to doing it for the whole class. As you can see here, I can do any of these functions and only do it for specific children. So it can be done as a whole class, or it can be done as a group of small children, a group of large groups or small groups, or just individual pupils. So again, you've got that option. Notice here that I've pinned Andy to the front page. Now, obviously, again, this is a bit false because I've only got 2 pupils. But if I had 30 pupils in my class, if Andy was the one who I was most, I suppose, distrusting of, if I pin him here, what that means is that whenever I open up my teacher's tools, Andy will always be at the top. So if I want to very quickly see what he's been doing, I can always go on and see him very easily without having to scroll through and see page after page. So that's, I suppose, really, in effect, the basics of what you can do. What I would suggest, if you were going to be thinking about using this, is possibly to think about using it in a positive way rather than necessarily a negative way where the children think that they're being watched. And the good way to do that would be that if you were working with children and you wanted them, say, not so much to sort of show them that you can look at their screen at any point, or not to show them that you can lock down your screen. It's more as a way of helping them with whatever it was they were doing. So if it was a piece of writing, and for instance, you had created a Google Doc with, say, vocabulary on it, you could actually lock them down to that screen, or share that URL with them so they can only see that piece of work. just as a way for them to see that this is not designed for them to feel like, Big Brother is watching. It's more, actually, it can be quite supportive for them. I was saying to a group I did this with before, down the school in P1, P2, this might be a really useful way for children not to be able to accidentally jump from thing to thing. So if you're working with, a group of P2 children, you might actually they might find it helpful to be able to be locked to one screen, to whatever it is they're doing. It's a game that you've got for them to go on their Chromebooks, that actually that's all they can go to. Because often, as you'll know, with younger children, they can flick around from clicking on the wrong thing and jumping from screen to screen. So it can be used positively, but obviously it can also be used as a way for you to see what they've been doing, and also to limit their access. Does that kind of make sense if I come back? How would you envisage that working for you, if at all?
I could see it being quite useful, because I know a lot of my guys will be sitting with multiple tabs, as you say, Robert, and they do get a point that they get so used to it, they're flicking in and out, and it's just they're then losing their attention. And so as a means of keeping attention and keeping a focus on their learning, then you'll probably get through lessons a lot quicker.
Yeah, I think for me, it's about, obviously you wouldn't be using this all the time.
No.
It's when you're doing focused teaching, and it's because as much as we try to give them the trust, I think it's quite useful just to be able to lock them down for that time period. And whether it's, just for the actual teaching input, then when they're doing their writing, they've got that option to jump. But it just means that you do have some options. Certainly we've pushed this out to a few primary schools. I'll just give a wee bit of background. The real reason that we have promoted this initially, I think it was Claire that asked about secondary, is because for exam purposes or for assessment purposes, secondary schools are seeing this as an absolute, godsend, that they can actually lock down a Chromebook to an assessment. And they can do it so that the pupils can't access Wikipedia, they can't access a dictionary if that's what they need to have. It really just gives them that confidence that what they're doing under assessment is entirely secure.
Yeah.
Then it was sort of from that we spoke to some schools, and it was, I think, Merton were one of the first schools, and they thought this would be great for them to be able to actually, as you say, Stephen, just actually sort of channel, whether it's individuals or whether it's the whole class, but just let them know that there are options. And as I say, starting positively rather than locking them down because they've done something wrong, but just almost showing them how it can be quite helpful to have that focus.
I think,
what do you think? Oh, sorry, go for it, Stephen.
I think the fact that you can have it with small groups, be able to share your screen that way will be really beneficial. And the fact that you can share your screen with the whole class, so even if you're doing a full class novel or book that you can bring up online, we can all follow along and read from it, will be great.
Yeah, and that's why I think in some ways my shift away from interactive boards is kind of continuing to go that way, because I think this allows you to have that sharing facility without having to have, that expensive interactive board. And there could be pupils in your class who perhaps you have it on the board, but perhaps visually it's quite difficult for them to see from a distance. So actually having their own, on their own screen, I think would be a really big help. What are your thoughts, Claire? How could you see that working?
Yeah, I think it's great. We often have lots of teachers complaining that the children, as Stephen said, aren't focused on what they're doing. Yeah. And what you're saying at the infant end, to have them just to be able to access the websites that you want them to, is fantastic, because you just turn your back and they've gone somewhere else, or, it's gone. And so this will be great. It's a real time saver. Yeah,
I think where it's not, where they haven't got their own device either, if you're using a Chromebook that's kind of shared, you could set a game up and just lock it down to that game, so that when the kids have finished playing the game, they can't go off and do whatever they want to do. And sometimes it's out of just accident, it's just that they're by mistake. But other times they get quite kind of savvy and start to, jump from thing to thing. The key part of this, I should have said when I mentioned Google Classroom, is to make sure that your classrooms are, this probably will sort of refine the way that you think your classrooms, because, as you can probably imagine, if I had a class, typically in primary school, it's not going to be so bad, but if I had a class, I don't know, that had pupils from two different classes in it, when I start that Google Classroom, when I start that Securely Classroom, any of the settings will apply to everyone in that classroom. So if you had, say, a P6 that was in a P7 Google Classroom for some reason, when you start locking the screen, it might be in a different room or a different building, but all of a sudden their screen's going to start locking as well. So it really only applies to everyone that's in that classroom. That's really probably more a secondary thing where you might have classes that are mixed up. But as long as you know who's in your class, then it basically just, it correlates exactly with your Google Classroom. So when new pupils arrive and you add them to your Google Classroom, they will automatically get added to the Securely Classroom as well.
Robert, so say if I wanted to share a YouTube clip, and so I was just locking on my screen, they would just be able to watch that video with the speaker from their Chromebook all at the same time.
Yeah, you would have two options. You could either, you could either do it in a way that they had the choice whether they wanted to watch it or not, or you could do what I think I showed you, just where you can actually choose when you go to share screen. You've got the second page, I think, says lock to share screen, and that then means that they've got no choice but to watch it because it's actually locked to that screen. So yeah, and again, that's possibly useful if it wasn't a video they were watching, if it was something that you had on your screen, but actually they didn't have to keep looking at it all the time. If it was like a reference guide, if you shared it with them, it would mean they could come back to it when they wanted to, but they're not tied down to only that screen. But yeah, for a video, that would be perfect. Just lock it to that screen, let them watch it, and then unlock it.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
After the classroom is finished, it will actually send you via email a report on the main events that happen during that time. So even if you've not actually been, in effect, checking every pupil, it will flag up anything that was considered, if you like, inappropriate. It will flag up anything that, the kind of number of, I think it tells you if anybody has been jumping from page to page, it will say, the kind of high, I'm not sure how it words it, but the high numbers were, so Narelle has, during that session, visited 45 sites. So it kind of gives you the headlines as well. And that's automatic after you close up that classroom.
Okay.
If I just go back in again and just show you now how I would wrap that up, because obviously I set this one up for an hour. So as we know, sometimes your lessons go occasionally ahead of plan, and you're actually ahead of the game. If that was the case, at the moment, the kids are locked into whatever settings you've got until the class finishes. But as soon as I press stop class, that's the class now stopped, and the pupils' Chromebooks will now go back to normal. The other really key part, which I think is important to know, if parents ask about this, is that this only works between 9 and 4 o'clock. And the reason for that obviously is quite deliberate. It's so that teachers, who I don't know, for whatever reason they wanted to go onto people's devices in the evening, they can't do that. So that kind of protects teachers, protects pupils. It only in effect works during the school day. So there's no, visiting anybody's site or locking anyone down. So if parents do ask, it's purely for during the school day. So that's how I would that's how I would finish that class. And again, I can start it again whenever I wanted to. And I can just get it all started again, and that obviously would start the class up once more. So the best way to probably just to get a kind of hang on this, or to get a feel for it, is just at some point when you get a moment, just go to securely.com, log in using your Google account, go to teacher tools, and as I say, you should then see in the class lists just the classes that you are teacher. If you're co-teacher, that's fine, but it's just basically any class that you have got in your Google Classroom dashboard. That will be available, and you can apply these rules to any of those classes that you want to.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any questions or anything else that you want me to?
No, it just automatically goes on, Robert, doesn't it? It's not anything to do with what you put on Google Classroom or anything like that.
It literally just picks up your class and the members of your class, and it then just applies whatever policies you or whatever decisions you want to make. As I say, it does give them notifications, so it does tell them, but obviously unless they close their Chromebook, they can't stop it from happening. It's going to take control. I think it's one of these things that I think they are required to be told, just so they actually do know and they are aware.
Okay, that's grand.
Well, have a go at it, and you're welcome to give me a shout back if you've got any challenges or any issues with it. But hopefully, once you get into it, it's actually quite straightforward and quite intuitive. And as I say, you can use it as much as you want to, you know. And if anybody, Claire, you think wants to see it, you know, if you're obviously welcome to show them yourself. But happy to do another session if you think there are other people. Yeah, you're right about the infants, because you know when you sort of think about this initially, you probably would think, yeah, this is ideal for P6 and P7, but it might actually be something that P1, P2, P3, for anyone that's got shared devices, might actually find this really useful just to know how to do that, so that they can limit what the kids can access.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for that. It's going to be really useful.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, Robert, grand.
Thanks then.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, speak to you again. Cheers, guys. Bye now.